Hey humans, how's it going? Susan Ruth here. Thanks for listening to another episode of Hey Human Podcast. This is episode 310, and I spoke with John Lefebvre. He is a Canadian musician, composer, entrepreneur, retired lawyer, philanthropist, climate activist, and an author, including All's Well, Where Thou Art, Earth, and Why, which is a work of political, moral, and legal philosophy, as well as a memoir that was actually penned by Kerry Gold entitled Good with Money, A Rich Guy's Guide to Gaining Everything by Losing It All. John co-founded a billion-dollar company and ended up losing it all when the feds came in to seize the company, and he was brought up on several charges, and only one stuck, and he served 45 days in prison. He went from being quite wealthy, like $500 million wealthy, to nearly losing it all. I can't imagine what it's like to have $500 million and then lose nearly all of it in basically overnight. So it's a interesting conversation for sure. Okay. Usual stuff, Hey Human Podcast on Instagram and Facebook. Social media personally for me is Susan Ruthism, SUSANRUTHISM, and that's Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. You can email me, susan@heyhumanpodcast.com. If you go to heyhumanpodcast.com, you'll find a links page. Every guest gets their own pile of links to make it easier for you to find the things we talk about. So definitely go check that out. On there, you'll also find the store front on that heyhumanpodcast.com. And you can get t-shirts or hats or artwork, tote bags, that kind of thing. Check that out. It's a great way to help support Hey Human. For those of you that want to go back and listen to old episodes and you're on something like an iTunes, they only show 300 episodes at a time. But if you go to heyhumanpodcast.com, you're going to find every episode that has ever been done. And I don't know why the algorithm on Apple only shows you 300 at a time, but now that I'm up to 310 episodes, if you want to go deep diving, I believe you have to go to the website to do that, because I don't know, and I haven't checked. I apologize for not looking, but I think when you go down the iTunes scroll of podcasts available, unless you're on your computer browser, if you're on your phone, I don't think it shows everything. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it doesn't. Rate and review Hey Human and subscribe on iTunes and wherever you get your podcasts. That really helps a lot. Hey Human is an ad-free podcast. If you'd like to contribute and help keep her going, you can do that on the contribute button there on the website as well. My YouTube channel is Official Susan Ruth. Please subscribe to that. Go to susanruth.com if you'd like to learn more about me, like my art and my music, if you want to hear interviews with me that other people have done where I'm the interviewee. And I think that's about it for the usual stuff. Let's get into the show. Thank you for listening. Be kind, take care of each other, be well. I appreciate you. And let's get into this. Here we go. John Lefebvre, welcome to Hey Human.
I'm very pleased to be here. Thanks for having me, Susan. We're on.
We're live. No, we're not live. We're not live. We're not dead.
Live to tape.
Live to tape. That's exactly right. Welcome to the show. Thanks for being here. And you are in Canada, eh?
Yeah, on an island west south and west from Vancouver, about 50 miles out in the ocean. We're the most southerly point in Canada, I think. We're about 40 miles below the 49th parallel, so we're kind of like Canada's, Hawaii.
I was going to ask, is it banana belty?
Yeah, it's pretty nice. We have, snow maybe twice a year. It's a lot like Seattle.
Yeah, well.
Maybe a bit more sunny.
Yeah, I was going to say Seattle's not super sunny, but.
Yeah, we have a little bit of a. I was just going to say we're in a little bit of a rain shadow here. We have about 40% less rain than Vancouver does. So.
There you go. Yeah. I've spent a lot of time.
This year is different.
Oh, because the climate. So, yeah,
climate's moving around a little bit.
Yeah, we'll get to that as well. Well, let's dig into you. You grew up in Canada?
if I did at all. I am 70. I think I'm going to be grown up by the time I'm about 75.
Did you grow up in a big family, small family?
No, I was a small family, and we were missing our dad. My dad died when I was 3, my sister was 5, and my little brother was 1. He was a soldier, and he died in an automobile mishap in a blizzard in Ontario. And my mom moved back to Calgary and raised us on her own. He was a beautiful guy. Well, everybody who knew him just talks about how engaging and funny he was. But my mom brought us back to Calgary, and we were raised pretty much in the Catholic tradition. I've repented myself of most of that, but I've brought along what I think to be the valuable parts of it, and there are many of them. They introduced me to this guy. I don't think they had him quite right, but he was a very very, very important guy to get in. Jesus of Nazareth, they call him now, I think. But his problem in the church, I think, is that he's been in the hands of popes for too long. Mm-hmm. But there's ways of getting to the real guy, and I think it's worth it. He's a very stone motherfucker.
Yeah, I mean, the things that Jesus believed in was the real deal. Quite the.
My mom had. There was lots of company around. I think the priests in Calgary recognized that my mom was always good for a scotch. And we had they were coming around, and lots of people who thought on that sort of level, spiritual theology. They were quite kind of, I don't want to say left wing, but progressive Catholics. Pope John the 23rd Catholics. There was a time when I don't want to hijack the conversation here, but I'm just going to say quickly, John the 23rd has been rebuked by so many of the popes since. But one of the things he said was, in every case of conscience, every case, our conscience, honestly consulted, is the final arbiter of right and wrong. And that's a very out there thing for a Catholic pope to say. You don't hear stuff like that anymore. And that's why, whole college courses have gone to theologically dismissing John the 23rd.
Well, I think a lot of people don't want to look at their own conscience, right? Because it's marred and sullied, and their own interests tend to usurp the greater good.
Including the church.
100%. I think that's true, yeah.
My mom introduced us to, Pete Seeger and, great piano players, opera singers, lots of Broadway musicals. So I got a really good dose of music when I was a kid. My sister and I, sang all the Peter, Paul, and Mary songs, and and that grew into Graham Parsons and Emmy Lou Harris songs and that kind of thing. And so we were kind of like campfire. So that was a big part of my youth. The 3 of us, my brother and Ted, had an excellent life for kids raised in a misshapen family.
Did you have a sense that it was misshapen, or did you feel like it was because it was what it was?
Yeah, I did. We had the father and son altar boy breakfasts, and I, somebody else's dad always invited me along. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or my grandfather would. Some of those social things that we had. It's a little bit like a handicap. We didn't think of them so much when we were kids. Now people are more considerate, for those non-traditional families.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting that you had the theological influence. If people were coming over and having those discussions, did you as a kid grow up with an understanding of God for yourself, or was it based on everybody around you? Do you know some kids take what they're listening to and they make their own story of it that suits them? Mm-hmm. Were you more towing the line?
I tried the towing the line thing. It worked until I was, I'll say, adolescent. And then after that, I was not too sure if they really had that good of a handle on right and wrong. Mm. I knew that there was some wonderful teaching there and a very, very profound not understanding, but a thesis anyways about love. And it was, by the time I was 17, I was, dropping acid and listening to, what Jimi Hendrix and Neil Young had to say about love. And So, and the reason I bring it up at all, Susan, is because that youthful exposure I had to theology and this concept of like eternity and infinity and somebody up there, some all powerful thing loves us all. We were primed for that, and it turns out to be the truth. But it's just the image of it that the Catholics have embraced and kind of solidified into I call it a dogma or whatever is. Very kind of soulless, really. Some people within that institution are the most beautiful human beings I've ever met, in spite of the institution. Right? Sure. You think of a guy like Saint Francis, who's famous for talking to birds, right? And you don't have to. We know now in our free society that we don't have to submit to all the rules. Right. We just, but I was, so by the time I was, by 12 or 14, I was pretty much done with it. Right. But, as I grew, and you reject everything, right? You just kind of like that. Sure. But as I grew, I came to realize that actually some of the most wonderful things that I was ever taught were taught to me by hypocrites, but they were still wonderful things.
Well, I would say too, kneeling at the altar of LSD and listening to the prophet Jimi Hendrix would also open your mind quite a lot.
Yeah, opened it all the way.
Yeah, I took a lot of LSD in high school, and I freaking loved it. And I think it opens, and I'm not advocating it for everyone, but it certainly for me opened up a whole other.
Well, yeah, I mean it knocks us upstairs. Yeah,
I love that. That's a great way to put it.
I like the way Neil Young mentioned it in there. There's a song called Thrashers. I think he said it's when the thrashers are coming. I think it's like the end of life, right? But his reference was when the aimless blade of science slashed the pearly gates. And so all of a sudden we were just kind of bombed into, the light, I guess, right? And then we feel, I think what we discover is, you tell me if you think this is close, but what we discover is when we go deep enough inside ourselves, we see what we're all made of. And sometimes I say stuff like, people try to call it God, but to me, that implies some other, right? So in that respect, misses it.
It's not outside of ourselves.
Yeah. Mary Magdalene, Mary was his partner. I think they hung out all the time, right? Yeah. I think they learned from each other lots.
Yeah, they were ride or die for sure.
So yeah, no, it was great. I was a very, very privileged childhood, but normal. My mom was a widow and had an army pension. I think she got like $90 a month or something in 1955. And that grew. But one of the things she also got out of it was free university education for her and for her kids. But when we start talking about privilege today, and I think we might, I became, infinitely more privileged than just about everybody else on the planet. But still, it's very important for us in our society to recognize that, anybody who's listening to this show is like infinitely more privileged than 80% of the world. And that has some implications that I think are very fascinating, very compelling. Mm-hmm. And that's part of what my gig is now, is trying to help us in these affluent societies understand first what a blessing it is to be one of the universe's vessels of consciousness, but also what the duties that come with that, the duties that come with freedom.
What'd you go to school for in college?
I wound up being a lawyer. I went to school because, I got knocked up. That's what I went to school for. But I didn't have much math. I wasn't very attentive at high school in terms of attendance. But I didn't have much science, so I couldn't be a doctor. So all I could do is read. So what do you got left? You got to be a lawyer, pretty much, right? A small kind of storefront practice for most of my career, and that was lovely. I didn't really, practicing law didn't really massage my soul much. Lots of people I know got really great careers of it, and still have them. But it wasn't, I didn't find one. The only thing that I loved about the practice of law that I had was the visiting with people. Was super rewarding, and helping them with problems. I enjoyed literature and philosophy a lot more than I enjoyed law.
Why didn't you become a teacher?
It's a good question. You have these ego trips, right? You think, I could be a lawyer, or something. I don't know what it is, but I think I was caught up in that sort of thing a little bit. I wouldn't be a teacher. I would be a professor. Yeah. But, in life was good to me anyways, even though I was, so deluded by those sorts of things.
Well, and law pays better for sure.
I never made a lot of money at law, but I made a lot of money at something.
Yes. Let's get into that. How did those opportunities present themselves?
Well, when I was a lawyer, a fellow wandered into the office once. My partner, Jane, was introduced to him because he needed some legal help. But Jane was doing like family law and estate law, and I was the, partner that was doing, the real estate and the financing and that kind of thing. And so Steve came to me, Steve Lawrence, and I helped him with some small-time real estate development stuff. He came upon this idea, among other things, built, a car wash in a strip mall, and he sold everything except the car wash. Why? Because it was cash. It availed him of what he called the small business deduction. Right. You can evade taxes by Anyways, Steve was working in the car wash one day, and he had this young guy, Jeff, 16-year-old guy, who was, putting the soap in the machines and taking out the coins. And Steve said to him, and Jeff was interested. This is about maybe 98 or so, 97, 98. Steve knew that Jeff was interested in this new thing called the internet. And he said, did you know you could gamble on the internet? And Jeff said, yeah, I was gambling on the internet last night. Well, were you? How did you pay for it? Well, with my dad's credit card. And then so Steve went, carried it on a little bit and said, well, do you think you could program a roulette game, or do you think you could program a black? He says, I don't know, why not? I can program anything. So they did. Jeff and Steve and this 16-year-old kid programmed, an online casino. And ran it. It was called GambleUSA.com. Talk about sticking your finger in Uncle Sam's eye. And they did that for a while.
Out of Canada, yeah. So was it not illegal? Because it was illegal at the time, was it not?
It was arguable.
Okay.
It's kind of a nuanced thing. It's illegal if the servers were in Canada, but maybe it wasn't if they were. Where does a contract exist? About contract conflicts of laws? Have you ever heard of that? It's where, if a transaction happens in two jurisdictions, the laws of which jurisdiction rule, right? And the rule is that the contract exists in where offer and consideration. Everybody knows that to make a contract, you have an offer, acceptance, and consideration. Consideration is like the deposit, when you pay the deposit. And where the deposit lands is supposed to be the jurisdiction, right? So if I get online and make a bet over a computer in Antigua, arguably that contract is an Antiguan contract and beyond the jurisdiction of the Canadian courts. That particular point hasn't been tried yet, but that was the basis upon which we were proceeding.
That's why so many contracts say, and if this comes to litigation, the state or place of litigation shall be blah. It's usually written in, at least these days.
Sure. And lawyers try to cover all those things off. Sometimes those things work and sometimes they don't. Depends on what the judge says. Right? One of the things he did, they went to Costa Rica, and one of the things, they met some people down there that were in the racket. And one of the things they did was set up, rather than using credit cards, Western Union, to use Western Union quick collect transfers. And they set up that, and all of a sudden the credit cards got shut down because there's all this fraudulent use of them in credit cards. And the bookies were scared because they were losing 15-16% to bad credit card debt, and their margin, their vig, the juice, was only like 3%. So it's hard to make money when you make 3 but you lose 15. So and Steve brought in this Western Union thing, which made it a little bit more secure. Anyways, the credit cards, companies got mad at online gaming. And then all of these bookies in Costa Rica were coming to Steve and saying, can we use your Western Union account? Can you transfer money? Could you transfer money? You can take a cut. And then Steve and Jeff decided, if somebody brought some professionalism, responsibility, reliability to the online money transfer portion of online gaming, that might make a good little business model. Then we did it. And Steve asked me, do you want to help a lot? He, as his lawyer, he says, he's busy with this. So he said, do you want to help me with this? And I said, sure. I thought maybe I could get back up to, net worth zero or something like that. But 3 years later, we were going public on the London Stock Exchange, and we achieved a market cap of around $2 billion, which is huge. I own 27% of that. I own 27% of $2 billion.
That's a big number.
Yeah, it is. That's a big hairball to cough up.
Yeah.
And
so I just want to make sure I'm getting it clear. So basically, y'all were the bank, like the house, in a way.
We were like PayPal.
Okay, for gambling.
We were like the bag man. Remember the bag man, the guy who runs back and forth with the little paper bag, right? Yeah. The house actually makes money, right? Gambling, but the bookies, the bag men only get what they get paid for carrying the bag around. That's what we did, and it was huge. We went to school on PayPal, and we became very much like PayPal, but for online gambling. Eventually, PayPal joined in and competed with us. And then they asked us if we wanted to join with them. And we thought we'd probably be losing some control. And we decided, we better learn to get along without PayPal. And did, but we did very well. When eBay decided to buy PayPal and then go public, then eBay had to say to PayPal, no more gambling. And they said, okay, well, we'll only do it for 6 more months. We'll only do it until we need glasses. But it was huge. It was huge. And there were, when in 2007, we were arrested for huge charges. But we were arrested halfway through our fiscal year. And we were tracking that year to transfer $14 billion.
And they came in because of the issue with gambling in the U.S.?
Yeah, because we were helping Americans gamble offshore.
Yeah.
One guy actually stood up in Congress and said, if we let these guys go on like this, they're going to be getting up in the morning and gambling from home in their house coats. And so that was what that was what the mischief was, gambling at home in your house coat. Not gambling, but not coming into our hotels.
The idea that somebody else is getting rich and not them.
Yeah, I think
they don't have a cut of it. That's right.
Like I said to you before, I've never been arrested for something that isn't legal now. They all joined in. I think we taught America some really good tax policy.
It's a legalized laundering in a way, I suppose.
That's one of the things they charged us with, laundering. We were signed up with FinTrack and all of those international monitoring systems. We were a public company, right? They really wanted to find us laundering money, but we had algorithms already that it alerted us if anybody was trying to use our system to amalgamate funds. One of the things people do to launder money is called smurfing. So if I have $1 million I want to launder, you can only take $10,000 cash into the bank, right? So what guys will do is have 150 people who each take in, $7,462. It's kind of a disbursement and then reamalgamation of the money. And if we'd watch to see if that was going on, we actually got a plaque from the Department of Treasury Secret Service for assisting them with 2 prosecutions. We alerted them that there was money laundering going on. And they, and then so anyways.
Did they seize your assets? Where did all the money go?
All of the money that was in the company was effectively seized by the U.S. Department of Justice. There was quite a bit of it, and then eventually they released the money too, because I think what they found out was there's 3 or 4 million people in the United States who were in all other ways, voters, honest citizens, that kind of thing, and it would not serve them well. They decided to just focus on the culprits. whereas the gamblers themselves, they wanted to let them have a pass. But,
it's sort of like when you arrest a sex worker, but let the John go free.
Exactly like that. Good for you.
What was your final accusation that put you in prison then?
You mean the final offense that I pled guilty to? Yeah, correct. They threatened to charge me with 3 different offenses. One of them was conspiracy. One of them was racketeering, and one of them was conspiracy to money launder. I eventually pled guilty to aiding and abetting illegal gambling. Mm. Yeah, and so that was a 5-year offense. The other 3 offenses, conspiracy, money laundering, and racketeering, were all maximum 20-year offenses. So they were threatening 60 years of offenses, and we got them down to 5. And then we had the plea bargain process. And at the end of the plea bargain process, I forfeited $40 million, my partner $60 million, and the company $140 million. So between the 3 of us, we forfeited $250 million. I got 45 days in prison. By far, the worst of it was that I was out on bail for about 5 years, and Uncle Sam was thirsty for my urine. I had to provide him with urine weekly at first, and then monthly. And so
on probation, you mean?
Yeah, out on bail. Oh. I was arrested, and then I was to cooperate for a while to help them understand the industry, to help them so they could prosecute it and make a whole bunch more forfeitures. But they didn't find what they were looking for. There was no money laundering going on. It was all just perfectly up and up transactions. They did, and after about 5 years, we worked out a plea bargain and finished it up with the plea bargain. And I wound up doing 45 days in prison.
How was that experience?
It was wonderful. I mean, it was shitty, but it was. I was in Manhattan. I was in the same prison that Epstein died in. I was in the same prison that they're keeping El Chapo in. I met my bunkie was Blood. He wouldn't tell me that. I asked my bunkie if there was gangsters in there, and he said, nah, they send all the gangsters somewhere else, he said. And then I was out playing chess with this other guy, Grady. Grady was a very distinguished guy, and he was a black guy too. Everybody was black. There was only about 96 guys on our wing, and there was only about 8 people that weren't black or brown. Anyways, I was playing chess with Grady, and he was really good chess player. And I said, yeah, so Grady, yeah, Sam, my bunkie, Sam tells me that there's no gangsters in here. And Grady goes, yo, bunkie? And I go, yeah. He says, he Blood. So when you're coming into prison, they ask you if you have any SEPs. And I go, SEPs, what's a SEP? And the guy says, well, if you had any, you'd know. And I said, well, no, tell me anyways, what's a SEP? And he said, it's short for separations. And what it means is, are there any people that you can't be in here with, So you can't go in and say, are you a gangster, right? But they still have to separate, because if you answer that, if you answer that question, that's like saying, yes, I'm guilty of racketeering, right? Mm. Because, that's what racketeering is about, organized crime. And so they can't say that, but they still have to separate these people out to limit the violence, to keep the jails kind of, right? So they ask you if you've got any SEPs, and you go, I can't be in with no Crips. Or I can't be in with Gaudis. I can only be in with Chiancanas. That kind of thing, right?
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. And so...
how old were you when you went into prison for the 40 days?
56 or 57 or something like that, or 58, yeah. I was, I was an old man. I was not attractive to too many people. So it was.
Were you concerned about that at all?
A little bit. I didn't, but that was just an ego trip. I thought, when you're 56 and think you're in danger of that, you got to think quite a bit of yourself.
Well, I would argue that rape is about control, not sex.
Sure. Well, absolutely. Yeah, but it wasn't the sex I was afraid of. It was the rape.
No, I know, but I'm just saying, you said it was an ego trip that they wouldn't be interested in a 56-year-old, and I'm thinking, well, if they felt they needed to control you somehow, perhaps.
Do you know Christopher Hitchens?
Yes.
He used to hang out with a guy named Martin Amos, who they wrote together as kids, and they asked him if they were homosexual lovers. Hitchens' answer was, by the time I met Martin, I was, 25 years old. I was so old, nobody wanted to fuck me but women.
That's a great answer.
The wonderful thing about it was learning that there is no difference between any of those people and us. You know, we think we're different, but we're not. We're all the same. And
circumstance makes something happen. Yeah, choices.
Most of the people who do get caught in the trap, you know, white guys walk and black guys don't. You know, and I was in there with guys that were doing 10 years and 20 years and 40 years. I met a guy who was doing 40 years for selling pot in Texas.
Yeah. People of color do not do well in the judicial system. They are absolutely, it's an unbalanced system for them.
They're entitled to respect, and they know they are, and so they demand it. And the way to be safe in prison is to give the people the respect they're entitled to, and let them know that you expect it too. And if you do that, then they treat you like, you know, a man. And it works. And there's some people you need to be cautious with, and there are other people in there that will help you with them, because those guys have stepped out of line before, and you know there's the protection system going on, and it's not it's a protection system that's based in goodwill, and you know not in like paying duties or bounties or anything like that. You know, if you're a respectful guy, you get help from respectful guys, and everything goes well. So, and you know, Susan, I was only in there for 45 days. I did time when I was a kid too. I was busted when I was 17 for, you know, selling LSD and pot to cops that were dressed up like hippies. And I knew anybody who thinks they're different or better doesn't do very well. Everybody's got all the same stories to tell. The basic mantra is do your own time. And when you start expecting people to listen to your whining, you might get your tray shoved off the table. Sure. So, you know, I'm still in touch with a couple of people that I met there. Both of them are still succeeding. You know, both of them are still kind of, you know, not in the revolving door anymore so far.
Great. That's great. You went in a wealthy man and came out a poor man, or did you still have your wealth?
The first day I went in, when I was arrested on Malibu Beach, I was super wealthy. You know, I mean, I had $500 million, right? But actually, I had somewhere around, you know, $350 million or something like that in terms of money that I'd actually pulled off the table, and, you know, money that wasn't just stocks, equities, you know, on the stock market. That the night we were arrested, they went from £6 to 60 pence. So that's about, you know, 90%. That was one hell of a night. That first night in prison in Los Angeles.
Wow.
I felt I was feeling pretty confined. I had a jet, you know, and I would get up in the morning and phone my pilot and say, "Can we go to Ireland?" And he said, "I'll file the plan. You want to go tonight?" I said, "Yeah, I'd like to arrive there in the morning." And that's what life was like for me. And then all of a sudden I'm in this, you know, little cell where, you know, you're expected to roll over on this side when the other guy goes to the toilet. It's different.
Yeah, that is different. Absolutely.
There is a big difference between prison in Los Angeles and prison in New York. The prison in Los Angeles is racist in a very amongst the prisoners. You know, all the white guys sit at the white table, and all the brown guys sit at the brown table, and all the black guys sit at the black table. I went over to the black table one day with my tray. I said, "Join you guys for breakfast." This guy goes, "It's free country." Like that. And I sat down, and they all kind of went like this. And when I talked to the guys later, I said, "Did I commit a faux pas or something?" And they said, "Yeah, you're lucky you didn't get your tray shoved in your face," and which was really upsetting. But in New York, it wasn't like that at all. In New York, everybody was just whoever you were. You were a good guy or you were an asshole, and the measure was more sophisticated in New York. They aren't all the same, but I was glad I had both experiences because it was where I live up here. We don't see the dirty side of racism very much unless we have First Nations friends. We were so privileged, didn't have to deal with that in our society like you guys do more in yours. Now we found out that actually we're wrong. We've just ignored, all of the murdered First Nations school children in the residential schools and, all of the rest of that stuff. So no, we've got some growing up to do on that score.
Yeah, unfortunately, humans will find interesting ways to be terrible to each other and find ways to other
somebody.
Yeah, it's a very popular pastime for a human being.
Yeah, well, we make ourselves better when we do that, right?
Right, in theory.
And the news is that there are better ways to actually make ourselves better. That's a failure. That's a loser's way to feel better. It's like you make yourself feel better when you're the guy who punches the other one in the face.
Until we as humans figure out how to touch our own pain, we will inflict pain on others. It's the only seemingly, it's irresponsible, but it's only seeming choice that people make. It's a real shame. It's sad. And I don't think it's going to happen in my lifetime, but I hope that we figure out a way to go inward first and look at that pain before lashing out. I hope someday that happens. I don't know that how many generations from now it will take.
Don't you think that some people do that now?
Yes.
Yeah. And I think to me,
100% they do it now. I'm talking about it as a whole, though,
Yeah, I don't think we can really let our sense of self happiness depend on the whole being perfect.
Sure. I get that too. I say that I just had that conversation yesterday, and when somebody was talking about how everything's going tits up, and I said, there's actually way more good in the world. There is. Way more good. It's just not interesting to newspapers or sensationalists or people who get the dopamine now from hating something instead of loving something.
Yeah.
I hope it writes itself. I do. But I was talking unilaterally, the feeling of eventually maybe we'll figure it
collectively. I think we will. I feel very optimistic, actually. It's a weird kind of optimism. I think, for instance, I think about 20 billion more people are going to die and then things will be better. But what I mean by that is around my granddaughter's generation, when my granddaughter's my age, that's what I mean. And because we're showing them how not to be, right?
Yeah.
What I hope to do is add to the conversation some principles that would serve people who want to move there. What my book is about is, if we are going to advance civilization, there are some principles that we need to adopt.
Do you think that generational pain can be a sweater one can take off? Do you think it's just so ingrained in some people?
Well, no, we learn from things. Alcoholics will have 2 kids, and one will learn to drink, and the other one will learn to be sober, right? Mm-hmm. And how I see the world is like the third kid who knows how to enjoy a drink and still be sober.
Right.
Right. And that's what we'll learn, but we're very near now, the freedoms that we enjoy in the Western world. We're super privileged here compared to everybody else in the world. And it's difficult for me to talk about privilege because, obviously I'm, stinking privileged. And, so back to that question you asked. When I came out of prison, I was never, I'll never be poor again. But I won't have hundreds of millions of dollars, but, neither will I have to work again. Right. I'm super fortunate. Those things that we take for granted in our society, they're quite basic. There's the reasonable access to food, clothing, and shelter, security and integrity of the person. These are things that we take for granted in our society. Reasonable access to the tools of self-improvement, education, reasonable access to health care.
If you have money and if you're not a person of color, though. I mean, 1 in 10 children in America are starving. There are kids that can't afford to get education. There are kids that are in generational poverty that can't. I mean, it's an economics problem, right?
Yeah, I know. And I know when I'm saying these things, I'm speaking from a point of privilege, and I understand that. But 70% of us in America are privileged compared to everybody else in the world. And we have all of these things, as well as reasonable access to education and health. There's also reasonable access to basic finance and to justice, right? We know where to turn when somebody's, screwing with us, and the help is there for us, more or less. Finally, reasonable access to a healthy environment. And we take all of these things for granted. And in my thesis, you know what? We should take them for granted. But it raises a very interesting implication, and that is, what's the difference between us and, the starving lady in Somalia with the baby dying at her dusty breast? Well, and try as I might to try to distinguish, okay, why should we be entitled to these? If we're entitled to these, what's the difference that they're not entitled? And there is no good answer to that. The answer is that all of those things that we take for granted, I think, are entitlements. And I mean, we're entitled to them as basic rights. So when I talk about equality, I'm not talking about equality of income or equality of power or equality. What I'm talking about is equality of basic rights. That's all. And it's our duty in our society of free people to do everything we can to assure that those who are less fortunate in the Freedom Department are on a track to getting that fixed. I think that's the price of freedom, is the duty to do that. Everybody has a duty to help those who are less free, and everybody who is free has a duty to help those who are less free, and everybody is entitled to help from those who are more free. Those of us who accept the benefits of freedom are happy with what has fallen in our laps for freedom, but could not care less about others who are less fortunate in the Freedom Department, haven't earned their freedom. They haven't paid the cost of their freedom. All they've done is taken liberties. So what we have to do in our society is, first of all, understand that the wealthy among us have to pay to make sure everybody has the same basic rights. You talk about the black kids who don't get health. You know what? That's a sin, right? And I'm not talking as Catholic. I'm talking about Jesus. It's a sin. It's like wrong. You hurt people when you don't. We hurt people if we don't provide them what is our duty to provide them, right? Here's where it gets difficult. There's no difference between that black kid down in the neighborhood and the black kid out in Somalia. Them too. But when we try to assert that everybody over there has those rights too, you've got some jurisdiction problems, right? You've got right? You've got sovereignty. Well, sovereignty, we got no jurisdiction over there. One of the examples I like to use is female genital mutilation, right? We know it's wrong. There's something about borders that means it's not our problem, right? It's not our responsibility, right? Wrong. We have to figure out how to do that. People all over the world who have less freedom than we have, we owe a duty to. And we have to figure out a way to do it. You know how parents, when they have kids, they have a duty to raise their kids well. And not knowing how you're going to do that does not excuse us of our duty. We have to find out how to do it, right? We have to find out how to go to Ethiopia and protect those young women. When those young women turn to us, we have to be able to tell them who in their community to turn to. We have to tell them that, no, you don't have to go through that to have integrity as a human being. When they come to us, we have to let them in to our society, or we have to go into their society and put our foot down. We're learning now, with all these things that are going on in our world, we're learning that we actually do have influence. More than that, we have ways of forcing. We could say jurisdictions that permit female genital mutilation to go on, either actually or even just tacitly, right? may not use our banking system.
Right.
Sorry, Ethiopia, you can't bank here until you do something about that. And when you do something about that, then you'll be able to bank here. So these sovereign borders aren't as difficult to cross as we used to think they are. We're going hard on Vladimir Putin.
I was just going to say, Russia being a prime example of what we're capable of doing.
He's teaching us our future.
Yeah.
One of the ways is how to stop guys like him.
Right.
The other is that we have a duty to stop him. It's not maybe. It's not like, see if we can find some place where we can kind of like get along, because we're paying the price of that now. We did that with Georgia. We did it with Chechnya. We did it with, Crimea, right? You can't be like that in our society. Here's the main picture. With all these universal rights, here's the main picture. Three things that are going on in our world right now are teaching us a lesson. We're at the dawn of a new epoch. And what that epoch is not lip service anymore, the fundamental concrete realization that Earth is one community. And please, give Earth a capital E. There's nothing that bugs me more than saying the Earth with a little e, like it's dismissing it, right? No. Earth is our greatest asset. And if we're conservatives, if we're good conservatives, we conserve our asset, right? We nurture our asset. We make our assets grow. Well, Earth is one that we have to do. But it's not the most important one. It's just the biggest one. The most important asset is the human resources. If we took all of the people in the world and developed them in terms of education and technology and all the other ways that we would have at least 5 times more geniuses in the world. There is no worse squandering of capital on our planet than people in the rest of the world being underdeveloped.
Yeah.
Right? And we owe it to them to do that. We have a big job ahead of us and a big long road to go. Contagion, of course, this constitutional problem about not trusting government being trustworthy. And the third one, of course, is climate. The 3 C's, I call them the emergent C's. And those 3 things are going to prove to us that Earth is one community. One community. And when we develop it, we'll turn it into an Eden. And when we do, we'll deserve it, because it will be us who has attended to it. It will be us who has earned it. It'll be us who's built it. I think that's what we're going to do. We have no choice. But we have no future that has Vladimir Putin's in it. And I hate to say it out loud, but Xi Jinping is the same. Can you hear me, Xi? I'm coming for you. And I think when we look at for things from that side, so to me, as overwhelmingly depressing as it is now to wake up in the morning with a guy like Putin running wild, the result of it is going to be we won't permit that anymore. We'll realize that we have to actually contain guys like him, and we have a responsibility. It's not whether we want to or not. It's not whether we'd like to. It's not whether we should. It's a duty to all their victims. And until we fulfill that duty, we can't really say we've earned our freedom. We're just taking advantage of our freedom, right? We're exploiting
all over the world where people like Putin exist and are doing bad things, and
we need to take them all down.
We need to take them all down, and it's no matter whether they happen to have bases in convenient places.
Yeah, if a bunch of militiamen came and kidnapped 400 adolescent women from a junior high school here and took them off and started using them for, sex machines for their army, we go right now. You don't even go to court. You just go stop them.
Right.
Right. And that's what we have to do. We have to, I'm speaking now to, my granddaughter's generation. We have to understand that this is a responsibility the whole world over. And it's not something that we should turn our backs on. When we think of war, we think, oh, no more war, no more war. But the problem is, when it happens at home, we don't think of it as war. At home, they're rapists, and we got to stop them, right? But don't forget, in this war, there is one guy who's a rapist and a whole other team that's not. And, you can't diss the people who are going there to respond to the war that started, right? Indeed, we should be encouraging them to stop it. That's not going to war. That's being a cop. That's being responsible, right? That's being dutiful. That's not an ugly thing. It is an ugly thing, but it's a duty. We can't laugh about it. That makes me sick. When people in your country laughed and cheered when Osama bin Laden was killed, I was disgusted. He needed to be stopped.
He did need to stop it. It's sort of that thing where I remember watching the footage for Ted Bundy because I was interviewing someone and I needed to watch it. And when Ted Bundy was executed, the people outside chanting, burn him, fry him, blah, blah, blah. And I thought, wow, it's a mass murderer person, but you're chanting for his death. You're not being any better. You're just mirroring his pain and anger and violence. We tend to put ourselves in I am noble in my murderous rage.
One of the things that I learned from being a rich guy is what we have in store, all of us, when we go out and when we adopt these principles that I think we need if we're going to advance civilization. When we adopt those, there's a joy that awaits us that we don't even know yet. And that is the dividends that come from generosity. Even if something's a duty, that doesn't make it not generous. Right? We have a duty to develop these people, to give them all of the tools that they need to make the best of themselves. And when we make them the best of themselves, the world is going to be a better place. The dividends of generosity are gratitude. And when people are grateful, they don't bust your balls. You don't need armies anymore. You still need cops. We need a huge force of police because there's a lot of guys out there we need to go after. There's a lot of guys we have to go after because we have a duty to their victims.
I think one of the biggest things that we can do is stop violence against women. And once that violence against women is stopped in all the various ways that it's perpetrated, there will be a shift. And when women realize that we are powerful, how powerful we are and what we can stand up for and against.
Absolutely. I hate this is going to sound weird to people, but the unrecognized horror in our society, there's so many ways in which women have been oppressed. And I just finished this wonderful trip. It was there's a book called The Immortality Key, and it's about the history of mysticism. The guy's a classicist. He studied all the different classic libraries in the world, and what he discovered was that now they use there's this chemistry that they use to look at these little clay pots and find out. What he was finding was that even 10,000 years ago, people were using ergot fungus and alcohol in a mixture. And it was a secret that the women held. And the women held this secret. And the reason they held it is because they were also holding the wisdom of the most important things. His finding was that along this trail of history where people were, taking grains with a little bit of poison in them and alcohol, mixing them together, and then they're opening their minds to these amazing comprehensions, right? It was all in the hands of women. In so many societies historically, the women were in charge of the most important choices. Why? Because they have a natural tendency towards understanding and compassion and helping and, all of those things that somehow has been lost on so many of us. I think there's, that exists in us all, but in our society particularly, we think it unmanly. If you're not talking about, sports, money, and,
Right. They suppress the divine feminine within them because it terrifies them.
Right.
Because that is holy, holy, the creator energy.
Yeah, exactly. And we're jealous of you guys because we can never create what you create.
I have it written down here. All is well, where thou art, earth, and why. And Good with Money, A Rich Guy's Guide to Gaining Everything by Losing It All. Those are your books. And are you writing a new one?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, because you said something a minute ago, I wasn't sure if you were speaking future tense or past tense as far as climate. So.
Oh no. I'm deeply involved with climate. You guys don't know David Suzuki, do you? David Suzuki.
He's a climatologist person in Canada.
Yeah. He's a microbiologist who's devoted his life to environmental concerns in Canada. He hangs, he knows all the big shots in America know him, and he's known all over the world actually, but America somehow has missed the story. But anyways, I do a lot of work with David. He's accepted me into his kind of inner circle, and he likes me because I encourage him to be radical, and all the people on the foundation go, no, you don't want to piss anybody off. I said, yes, you do. You want to. There's a few, and David likes it, so he keeps me around. All's Well Where Thou Art, Earth, and Why is a book that is kind of it's very rangy, and it goes somewhere between like lyric prose to very strict kind of legalese and everywhere in between. It goes out to outer space and all the way back down to earth in the most muddy ways. It's a bit elusive in ways what the whole point of it is, but all of these principles that I've been speaking to you about are in it. But I wrote it sort of as a work of poetry. It's like a work of literature. It's like a work of literature that has...
It's your Walden?
Huh?
I said it's your Walden.
Yeah, it's my Walden, and the Walden is Walden Pond is the universe. Yeah, that's right. I calculate that there are 30 trillion species like us in the universe, and the odds of us being the most advanced of them are like zero. And what that means is there are some species like us out there that have 1 million years more learning than we have. And so think about how much learning we've had done in the last 100 years since my mom was born. When my mom was born, people hardly even knew what germs were.
Well, at this point, every 10 years, even, I think the advancement.
Well, yeah, even we'll learn in the next 10 years as much as we have in the last 100.
Yeah.
Right. But imagine what we'll learn in the next 100. Yeah. Imagine what those people, somebody else has learned in 1,000 years. Mm. Imagine what they've learned in 1 million years, Susan. That's what we don't know. That's how vast our lack of knowledge is right now. One of the funny things about us is that we imagine that the proof that there's nobody else out there is because they haven't come to see us, as if anybody who'd have the capacity to come to see us but wouldn't, bother.
or have at some point seen us and thought, we're going to clear that planet maybe.
Yeah, exactly. We can wait. We have to. That's what my book is about. We have to come to a couple of basic things before it will be permitted into that community. That's the whole thesis of the book. Mm-hmm. And that is, all of the things that we ever need to know are already known by somebody. All we need to know is get in touch with them and prove to them that we cherish the natural beauty that has befallen us as much as it deserves, and that we cherish ourselves, every one of us, as much as we cherish ourselves. Why would they introduce us to the capability to decimate other natural bounties like this in the universe? Why would they introduce us to other species that we could treat as badly as we treat members of our own? We've got some growing up to do. So if we were wise, we would be humble, but we seem to be neither.
Yeah, we'll get there, I think. John, tell people how they might find you.
I thought of a way to answer this question I thought was pretty funny. Go out, sit quietly, close your eyes, and treat all of those random thoughts that come into your mind for what they are. They're visitors that didn't phone first and came knocking. They're clients that don't have an appointment. Practice skilled management of attention and make sure that those things, there's none of them that can't wait 30 minutes. No, there's none of them that can't wait 10 minutes. Almost all of them can wait a year. And yet, as soon as they come into our mind, we just we're governed by them. We're completely swept away by them. Sit quietly. That part of us that dreams at night, infinitely imaginative, creative, poetic, miraculously, right? That part of us does not go to sleep when we wake up. In the daytime, let that part be for a moment. Be still, yet still be. And you'll see a really, really amazing, miraculous, infinitely astonishing consciousness. And that's me. And it's you. There you'll find me.
I love that.
There you'll find me.
And also,
but I know that's not what you're asking about.
His accent just kicked in.
JohnLefebvre.com. Spell my name right on your site and people will be able to find me. All of the music I've ever recorded is there as well. I played with some of the greatest studio guys in the world, came and helped me do my songs. That's for another meeting. On Facebook, people sometimes operate what they call a page. I have a page that's called Thoughtful Species. And it's one of the lines from All's Well. One of the calculations I told you about is that I calculate that there are about 10 trillion thoughtful species in the universe. Well, we're one of them. Thoughtful Species is a page on Facebook, and it's, I kind of relate these concepts I have to, current events and that sort of thing on there. I think there's maybe 20,000 people have taken the time to say that page.
Sure. I'll link to that stuff on my heyhumanpodcast.com as well. But, John, thank you for taking the time to speak with me today. I really appreciate it.
You've been very generous. I look forward to listening to the rest of your music, and thanks so much for having me. It was a great pleasure to be here. Very nice to get to know you. Thanks.
Absolutely. Thank you for listening, everybody. Bye.
Thanks for making the time. I really appreciate it.
See you later.
Bye for now.
Bye.
Bye.
Rate, review, and subscribe to Hey Human on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks. Bye.